Good evening, and welcome back to the Poe Museum. Where did Edgar Allan Poe rest his tail when he wrote his terror tales? Right here. It's Edgar Allan Poe's chair, and that will be the subject of tonight's installment of the Curator's Crypt. So here it is. This is the chair that Poe used when he was editing the Southern Literary Messenger, a magazine here in Richmond, Virginia. So he worked there from 1835 until 1837, which turned out to be the longest he ever held a magazine job. And you'll see it's a pretty simple chair. It's got a tin seat on top, but that wasn't original. If you can look at the bottom here, you can tell that it originally had a cane seat. And also this dingy color isn't really original. There's a lot of traces here of a gold paint. So originally would have been painted gold. And another interesting feature, the top has been cut off. And the story is that it was actually Poe's boss, the owner of the magazine, who chopped off the back of the chair so Poe would sit up straight and not get lazy, not lean back and rest on the job, although I guess he could have just leaned forward and taken a nap on his desk, and that would have worked just as well. But anyway, the boss wanted to encourage Poe to work harder. At least that's the story. So what exactly did Poe write while he was sitting in this chair? Well, we know he published a lot of short stories in the Southern Literary Messenger, things like Berenice, that's a good one. That's the one where he rips out his wife's teeth, spoiler alert, or Morella, or King Pest. But I think a lot of those stories he'd already written while he's in Baltimore right before he moved back to Richmond. So he maybe at most edited those while sitting in this chair. But he also wrote a lot of nonfiction, a lot of book reviews, a lot of book notices. And he also wrote a story about a chess-playing automaton, so kind of like a robot. It looked like a man sitting behind a big cabinet, and it would perform on stage. Volunteers in the audience would come out and play chess with this robot. And right before it started, the owner of the cabinet would open up this door and open up that door, so that's just a bunch of gears inside this cabinet, and the people would play chess with the robot. And most of the time, they would lose to the robot. It's called Maisel's Chess Player. So Poe decided he was very interested in this. It came to Richmond to perform, and he studied up on it, and he determined what you already know. It was just a guy hiding inside a box, pretending to be a robot. But he blew the lid off this thing, and it was noticed in newspapers all over the country that this editor of this little magazine in Richmond had just exposed Maisel's Chess Player as a fraud and a cheat. And another thing that Poe wrote while he was sitting in this chair would have been autography. That's a series in which he pretended he could analyze people's handwriting. And each installment would include samples of people's handwriting and then his critique of how that reflected his character. But more often than not, he just used this as an excuse to make fun of other authors. But what about the fiction he wrote while he was sitting in this chair? Probably the best piece would have to be his only novel, his only finished novel, The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. Usually what they just call it The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym. And he published the first 2 installments in this magazine before he either quit or got fired. It was sort of a mutual thing to leave. And this is a weird one. It's a novel about a guy called Arthur Gordon Pym who decides he's bored with life and he stows away aboard a ship. But of course, there's a mutiny on the ship, and then there's a guy who gets killed, so he dresses up like the dead guy, so he could pretend to be the dead guy's ghost, so he could scare everybody. And eventually there's a storm, there's these 4 survivors. So it's Pym and his buddy Augustus Barnard, and another friend, and then Richard Parker, who's one of the mutineers who's managed to survive. And they're adrift at sea, it's burning up, they're in the hot sun, they've just about given up all hope. And then they see this ship coming in the distance. And they think, we're rescued. They can see the captain on board, and he's sort of leaning over the bulwark. He's smiling at them, and he's nodding like, yeah, I'm welcome on board, and I'm going to save you. And then they get closer and found, oh yeah, it's a plague ship. Everybody's dead. And not only that, but the captain, he's not smiling. These birds had eaten away at the flesh on his face. They plucked out his eyeballs. So you're just looking at a grinning skull. He's nodding up and down because there's a seagull on his back pecking away, just eating his brain, and his head's bobbing up and down. And then the seagull, he sees these 4 survivors, Pym and his friends, and he flies over them and he drops a hunk of meat right in front of them. And these 4 survivors look at each other and say, we're going to have to eat somebody. And it's actually Richard Parker who says, yeah, we've got to draw straws. Somebody has to die so we can survive. And they draw straws, and the short straw goes to Richard Parker. So they kill him and they eat him. And that's not all of it. This novel, that's only about halfway through the novel, so it just keeps going. And the first installments, as I said, appeared in the Southern Literary Messenger, so he would have written them while sitting in this chair. And it appeared the following year in book form, and within a few months it was reprinted in England without an effective international copyright law. As soon as it was published in the US, the book got reprinted overseas. He didn't get any royalties for it, but it actually sold better overseas than it did here. So the germ of that story probably took place while he's sitting in this chair, while he just started out those first installments. And after that, he decided that he really wasn't a novelist. He preferred to write short works, like short stories and short poems. He tried one other time to write a novel. It's going to be called The Journal of Julius Rodman, but he didn't finish that one at all. And I didn't even tell you the best part. Poe wrote the story 1837, published the whole novel in 1838, and in 1884, it happened. Really, there were 4 survivors. They were adrift at sea, and they decided, we need to eat somebody. So they drew lots, and the loser, the one they ate, and went to trial for murdering and eating him, his name? Richard Parker, which proves that Edgar Allan Poe is a time traveler. So that's something that happened here. And after Poe left the magazine, one of the later editors named Benjamin Blake Minor. And when they were moving the offices of the magazine to another building, they were getting rid of all the furniture. Minor took Poe's desk and chair home with him and kept them for the rest of his life. And only after he died, his daughters sold Poe's desk to one of the Poe Museum's founder, this Poe collector James H. Whitty. And this was donated to the museum when it opened by Mrs. James M. Phillips. So Whitty loaned the desk, and we had the chair already, and these were reunited at the Poe Museum when it opened back in 1922. But then just a few years later, Whitty got angry with the other founders of the museum, so he left the museum. He stepped down from the board. They kicked him off the board. And long story short, when he died, his daughter sold. Long story shorter, the desk is at the University of Texas at Austin now. And the chair, because this was a gift, not a loan, this is still here. And we actually did reunite the desk and chair back in 2009 for Poe's bicentennial. There's a big show that traveled from the University of Virginia to the University of Texas to Austin. So it got to see its friend, the desk. Right now we have another desk from the Southern Literary Messenger that we usually display with it. So it's still the right kind of desk, it's just not Poe's desk. And since it's been here, this has been one of the attractions. And aside from Poe sitting in it, a few other people have sat here. One of them was James Dickey, the novelist, best known for Deliverance. And he's also a poet laureate of the United States. And also the ghostwriter or ghost investigator, J.B. Taylor, also sat in this chair, do a news segment for the Today Show, which at the last minute was canceled. So they filmed it, but they never aired it. And one person who almost sat in the chair but didn't was the Hollywood icon Elizabeth Taylor. Her sixth husband was the Virginia politician Mark Warner, and there was a newspaper article right when they got married, when she was planning on moving to Virginia to be with him. She said she wanted to go to the Poe Museum and sit in Edgar Allan Poe's chair. But the marriage didn't last, and I don't think she ever had the chance to sit here. And really, we don't allow people to sit here anymore. It's kind of a bad idea, and I've never sat in the chair because I don't want to be the one who crushes Edgar Allan Poe's chair. So this is typically on display where you can see it but not sit in it here at the Poe Museum. So what do you think? Did sitting in this uncomfortable chair with this tin seat and the back chop off inspire Poe to write a tale of butchery, mutiny, and cannibalism? Or did it give him the vision to see decades into the future and predict the death of Richard Parker? Or was it just bad for his back? Let us know down in the comments what you think. And if you'd like to help us preserve precious Poe pieces like Edgar Allan Poe's chair, why not support the Poe Museum or become a member at poemuseum.org? Or become a patron at patreon.com/PoeMuseum. And until next time, thanks for joining us. And I'll leave you with more gratuitous footage of the Poe Museum cats doing Poe Museum cat stuff.